My white CEO wife thought she had me figured out, the reliable black mechanic who'd clean up her mess and raise her boss's baby without asking questions. She called it four appearances, like I was just some convenient prop in her corporate fantasy. But what she didn't know was that I'd been building something she couldn't see, something she couldn't take away, something that would flip the power in ways she never imagined. While she was playing games with her married boss and planning my humiliation, I was making moves that would leave her staring at my car in the driveway she lost. Some betrayals deserve more than tears. They deserve cold, calculated justice, and sometimes the quiet man with dirty hands holds all the real power. If you're watching this, subscribe and tell me where you're from, because you're about to see how a man reclaims his dignity without saying a word. The tablet's blue glow cut through the kitchen darkness like a blade. Marcus Cole's work boots barely made a sound on the linoleum as he set down his lunchbox and reached for Ava's iPad. Just needed to order brake parts for tomorrow's job. Simple. But nothing stayed simple when you found what you weren't looking for. The calendar app was open. Prenatal appointments, 3 of them, all scheduled for the past 6 weeks. Marcus's calloused fingers went still on the screen. His mind did the math twice, then a third time. The dates didn't line up, not even close. Water ran in the bathroom upstairs. Ava singing some pop song he didn't recognize. Steam probably fogging the mirror she'd wipe with her towel before putting on that face cream that cost more than his weekly grocery budget. He stared at the screen until the words blurred. September 12th, September 19th, September 26th. Dr. Martinez, prenatal care, first trimester. They hadn't been together that way since early July. Work had been crazy. She'd been traveling for the company. Separate beds more nights than not. He'd told himself it was just a rough patch. All marriages had them. The shower shut off. Marcus set the tablet down like it might explode. His heart hammered against his ribs. 32 years old, and he felt like a kid who'd walked in on something he shouldn't see. But this wasn't Santa Claus. This was his wife carrying someone else's baby. Marcus? Ava's voice drifted down the stairs. That you, honey? Yeah. His voice came out steady. Good. Just got home. He heard her moving around upstairs, opening drawers, probably picking out pajamas, the same routine they'd done for 3 years of marriage. Except now everything felt like a lie. The tablet screen dimmed, then went dark. Marcus stared at his reflection in the black glass, a tired man with engine grease still under his fingernails despite scrubbing, a man who worked 10-hour days and came home to a wife who made more in a month than he did in 6, a man who'd been stupid enough to think that didn't matter. How was your day? Ava appeared in the doorway wearing her silk robe. Still pretty at 30, still looked like she belonged in magazines. Blonde hair damp from the shower, skin that had never seen a day of hard labor. Long. Marcus turned away from the tablet. Yours? Board meeting ran late. Brent had us going in circles about Q4 projections. She moved to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of sparkling water. I'm exhausted. Brent, her boss, the CEO with the corner office and the sports car. Marcus had met him twice at company parties. Firm handshake, perfect teeth, the kind of man who called everyone champ and probably practiced his smile in the mirror. You eat? Marcus asked. Grabbed a salad. Ava twisted the cap off her water. Bubbles fizzed to the surface. There's leftover pasta in the fridge if you want it. Small talk. Normal talk. Like she wasn't carrying another man's child and planning to what? Hope he wouldn't notice? Hope he'd just go along with it? Ava. He turned to face her. We need to talk. Something in his voice made her go still. The water bottle froze halfway to her lips. About what? Marcus nodded toward the tablet. About your appointments. The color drained from her face. Even with all that expensive makeup she wore to work, he could see the exact moment she understood. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again like a fish thrown on dry land. Marcus, I. Are you pregnant? The question hung between them, heavy as a storm cloud ready to break. Ava set down her water bottle. Her hands shook just enough that Marcus caught it. Yes, it's not mine. Not a question. They both knew it wasn't a question. No, her voice came out as a whisper. It's not. The kitchen clock ticked, the refrigerator hummed. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Normal sounds for a normal night, except nothing about this was normal anymore. How long? Marcus asked. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Marcus. It just happened. Brent and I were working late and. How long have you known? Ava wrapped her arms around herself. 2 weeks. Maybe 3. And you weren't going to tell me? I was trying to figure out how. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. Marcus leaned back against the counter. The edge bit into his lower back, sharp and real. Everything else felt like he was watching it happen to someone else, like this was some movie he'd walked into halfway through. What did you think would happen? I'd just assume it was mine? I hoped. She stopped, started again. I thought maybe we could work something out. Work something out, he repeated her words, tasting them. They left a bitter flavor in his mouth. What kind of something? Ava straightened up. Some of that corporate confidence crept back into her voice, the same tone she probably used in board meetings. You could be the father on paper, for appearances. It would be better for everyone. Appearances? Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. Whose appearances? The board, the company. Brent can't, he's married. It would ruin everything he's worked for. And my position there, my career. Your career. Marcus pushed off from the counter. What about my life? Your life wouldn't change. Not really. You'd be a father, which you've always wanted. And the baby would have stability. A good home. With a lie at the center of it. It doesn't have to be a lie. It could just be complicated truth. Marcus stared at his wife, really looked at her. When had she learned to talk like this? When had she started using words like weapons? When had she stopped seeing him as her husband and started seeing him as a problem to solve? You want me to raise another man's child so your boss doesn't get in trouble with his wife and board? When you say it like that, how else should I say it? Heat crept into his voice for the first time. Because that's what you're asking. You want me to put my name on a birth certificate for a baby that isn't mine. You want me to lie to my family, your family, everyone we know. You want me to pretend like you didn't cheat on me. I never meant for this to happen. But it did happen. And now you want me to clean it up. Ava's eyes filled with tears. Real ones, Marcus thought. At least he hoped they were real. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But we can get through this. We can make it work. We. Marcus shook his head. There is no we in this plan. There's just me doing what you need to protect your image. That's not fair. Fair. Marcus let out a sound that might have been a laugh if it wasn't so hollow. You think any of this is fair? He moved toward the living room, needed space to breathe, needed somewhere to think that didn't smell like her expensive perfume. Where are you going? Ava followed him. To the couch. Marcus pulled a blanket from the closet. I'm not sleeping next to you tonight. Marcus, please, we can talk about this. We can figure something out that works for both of us. Both of us. He spread the blanket over the couch cushions. I don't think you know what that phrase means. The coffee table held a stack of mail they'd been meaning to go through. Bills, mostly. The mortgage statement sat on top. Their names printed side by side like they were a team. Like they were building something together. Marcus sat down heavily. The couch springs creaked under his weight. Same sound they'd made when they'd first moved in together. Back when he'd thought the class difference between them was something they'd overcome. back when he'd been dumb enough to believe love conquered all. I'll sleep upstairs, Ava said quietly. You take the bed. I'm fine here. Marcus, go to bed, Ava. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Marcus could feel her watching him, but he didn't look up. Finally, he heard her feet on the stairs. The bedroom door closed with a soft click. Marcus stared at the mortgage statement, his signature next to hers. Two people promising to build a life together, to be honest with each other, to forsake all others. He'd kept his promises, all of them. The house settled around him with small creaks and sighs, night sounds he'd grown used to over the years. This place had felt like home, like somewhere they could put down roots and grow something good together. Now it just felt like a building where he happened to sleep. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled to his sister's number. Nora would be getting ready for her night shift at the hospital. She'd answer if he called, drop everything to help him figure this out. But what was there to figure out? His wife was pregnant with her boss's baby and wanted him to pretend it was his. The math was simple. The solution wasn't. He set the phone aside and picked up the mortgage statement instead, read their names again, studied the payment history. They'd never been late, never missed a month. Building equity together, the bank lady had said when they'd signed the papers. Building a future. Funny how fast a future could turn into a past. Marcus folded the statement and slipped it back into the pile. Tomorrow he'd have to face Ava again. Tomorrow they'd have to talk about lawyers and custody and how to untangle 3 years of marriage. Tomorrow his life would officially split into before and after. But tonight, he just sat in the dark and listened to the house breathe around him. The kitchen felt different at midnight. Shadows sat in corners like uninvited guests. The refrigerator's hum seemed louder. Even the air felt heavier, thick with words that couldn't be taken back. Marcus hadn't slept, didn't think he would. His mind kept circling back to the same questions. How long had it been going on? How many late nights at the office were really something else? How many times had she come home and kissed him after being with Brent? His phone buzzed. A text from one of the guys at the shop about tomorrow's schedule. Normal life trying to break through the chaos in his head. Tomorrow he'd still have to show up. Still have to fix engines and change oil and pretend his world hadn't cracked down the middle. But first, he needed to make a call. Marcus opened his messages and typed carefully. Call early. Need to talk. He sent it to Nora, his little sister who'd become an ER nurse because she couldn't stand to see people in pain, who'd always been smarter than him but never made him feel stupid for it, who'd know what to do when he didn't. Next, he opened the camera on his phone. The appointment schedule was still there on Ava's tablet. 3 appointments, all the proof he needed that this baby wasn't his. Marcus took pictures of the screen, date stamps and doctor names and everything that would matter later. Evidence. That's what this was now. His marriage had become a crime scene and he was collecting clues. The thought made his stomach turn. Footsteps on the stairs made him look up. Ava appeared in the doorway, hair messy from sleep she probably hadn't gotten either. She wore one of his old t-shirts, something from college that had gone soft from washing. Seeing her in it hurt more than he'd expected. Can't sleep either, she asked. No. She moved to the kitchen table and sat across from him, close enough that he could smell her shampoo, far enough that they might as well have been on different planets. I kept thinking about what you said, about working something out for both of us. Marcus set his phone face down on the table. And? Maybe we could figure out some arrangement, financial, legal, something that protects everyone. Everyone. Marcus studied her face. She looked tired, scared, younger than her 30 years. But there was something else there too, something calculating. You mean something that protects Brent, and you, and me, and the baby that isn't mine. Ava flinched like he'd slapped her. I know you're angry. You have every right to be angry. But taking it out on an innocent child? I'm not taking anything out on anyone. Marcus kept his voice level, quiet. I'm stating facts. You're pregnant. It's not my baby. Those are facts. But we could make this work. Legally, I mean. If you were listed as the father, you'd have rights and responsibilities, sure, but also a real voice in how the child is raised. Marcus leaned back in his chair. You want me to sign up to be the legal father of your boss's baby. When you put it like that, that's what you're asking. Ava wrapped her arms around herself. I know it sounds crazy, but stranger things have worked out. Blended families, complicated situations. This isn't complicated. This is you asking me to lie. It's me asking you to be flexible, to think about what's best for everyone involved. Marcus stood up, needed to move, needed to think without looking at her wearing his shirt and asking him to raise another man's child. What's best for everyone? Or what's convenient for you and Brent? That's not fair? Fair? He turned back to face her. You keep using that word. Want to know what's not fair? Finding out my wife is pregnant from her calendar app. Want to know what else isn't fair? Having her ask me to pretend it's mine so she can keep her job and her boyfriend can keep his marriage. He's not my boyfriend. It was a mistake. A stupid mistake that happened once. When? What? When did it happen? Was it really once? How long has this been going on? Ava's eyes filled with tears. Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. She was quiet for a long moment. The kitchen clock ticked away seconds that felt like hours. July, she finally said. The company retreat. We'd been drinking. Everyone was talking about work and the board and all this pressure Brent's been under. His wife doesn't understand the business. She wants him to take early retirement. He was stressed. So, you comforted him. It wasn't like that. What was it like? I don't know. Complicated. We were in his suite going over presentations and just what? Kissed me, and I didn't stop him, and one thing led to another. Marcus felt something cold and sharp settle in his chest. Once. Yes, once. July. The weekend retreat. Yes. And you've been working late together how many times since then? Ava went very still. What are you asking? I'm asking if it really was once, or if that's just what you're telling yourself. It was once, I swear. Marcus studied her face, looking for tells, signs. 3 years of marriage should have taught him how to read her lies. But maybe she'd just gotten better at lying. And now you're pregnant. Yes? And you want me to be the father on paper. For appearances, yes? Because Brent can't afford the scandal. And neither can I. Marcus, you don't understand how the corporate world works. If this gets out, I'll lose my position. Everything I've worked for. And what do I lose? The question hung between them. Ava opened her mouth, then closed it. Opened it again. You'd gain a child. You've always wanted to be a father. I wanted to be a father to my child. With my wife. Not to someone else's baby while my wife carries on with her boss. I'm not carrying on with anyone. It was a mistake. One night. One stupid decision that I regret every second of every day. Marcus moved to the cabinet where they kept important papers. Bank statements, insurance documents, the mortgage folder. He pulled out a manila envelope and set it on the counter. What are you doing? Separating our finances. Marcus opened the first bank statement. Starting tonight, we're keeping our money separate. I'll pay my half of the bills. You pay yours. Marcus, that's not necessary. Yeah, it is. He folded the statement and slipped it into the envelope. It's respectful. Clear boundaries while we figure this out. Figure what out? He looked at her then. Really looked at her. She seemed smaller somehow. Fragile. Like something that might break if he spoke too loud. Whether we have a marriage worth saving? Ava's face crumpled. Of course we do. One mistake doesn't erase 3 years. One mistake. Marcus shook his head. You're pregnant with another man's baby and asking me to claim it. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A series of choices. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. So you decided to lie. I decided to protect my family. Your family. Marcus felt something bitter rise in his throat. Which family is that? Me? Or Brent and the baby? You. You're my family. You're my husband. Then act like it. The words came out harsher than he'd intended. Ava flinched like he'd hit her. I am acting like it. I'm trying to find a solution that works for both of us. No. Marcus closed the manila folder and tucked it under his arm. You're trying to find a solution that works for you and Brent and your career. I'm just the guy who gets to clean up the mess. He moved toward the living room. Ava followed. Where are you going? To bed. On the couch. You don't have to sleep on the couch. Yeah, I do. Marcus set the folder on the coffee table and arranged his blanket. I'm not sharing a bed with you right now. For how long? I don't know. Marcus, please. We can work this out. We can get counseling. We can talk tomorrow when I've had time to think. He sat on the couch and pulled off his work boots, set them neatly by the coffee table like he always did. Some habits died hard. Ava stood in the doorway for a long moment. Marcus could feel her watching him, but he didn't look up. Finally, she spoke. I love you. I need you to know that. Whatever happens, I love you. Marcus lay down and pulled the blanket up to his chin. Good night, Ava. He heard her feet on the stairs, the bedroom door closing, the house settling back into quiet. Marcus stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about how many nights he might be spending on this couch. Tried not to think about how his wife's belly would grow over the next few months. Tried not to think about holding someone else's baby and pretending it was his own. Instead, he thought about his sister Nora, about the early morning call he'd make, about bank statements and separate bedrooms and all the small ways a marriage could come apart. Tomorrow would bring new conversations, new decisions, new ways to hurt each other without meaning to. But tonight, he had the couch and the darkness and the mortgage folder on the coffee table. Tonight, he could still pretend he was just a man with a problem he could solve, even if he wasn't sure he wanted to solve it anymore. The hospital coffee cart sold the worst coffee in the city and charged like it was good. But it was hot and black and exactly what Marcus needed at 6:25 in the morning. Nora appeared around the corner in her scrubs, dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had survived 12 hours in the ER. She took one look at his face and stopped walking. How bad? She asked. Bad. She bought her own terrible coffee and led him to a bench outside the main entrance. Early morning traffic hummed past on the street, people heading to normal jobs with normal problems. Talk to me. Marcus told her everything, the tablet, the appointments, Ava's plan to make him the father on paper, all of it spilling out in quiet, careful words while his sister listened without interrupting. When he finished, Nora was quiet for a long moment. She stirred her coffee with a plastic stick, even though she'd added nothing to it. What do you want to do? She finally asked. I don't know. Yes, you do. You just don't want to say it yet. Marcus studied his sister's face, 28 years old and already one of the best nurses in the ER. Smart enough to have been a doctor if money hadn't been an issue, practical enough to see solutions when he only saw problems. I can't raise someone else's kid and pretend it's mine. Then don't. But if I leave, who says you have to leave? Marcus frowned. What do you mean? I mean, maybe she's the one who should leave. Maybe you shouldn't be the one to give up your home because she messed up. It's our house, both our names on the mortgage. Is it? Something in her voice made him look at her closer. What are you thinking? I'm thinking you need to talk to Mr. Patel about that lease you signed, about any clauses you might not have read carefully. What kind of clauses? The kind that might give you options. You've been paying rent for 3 years, never missed a month, always paid early. You've got good credit. You're a responsible tenant. Nora sipped her coffee and made a face. Sometimes landlords put clauses in long-term leases, rent-to-own options, first right of refusal if they decide to sell. Ava handled most of the paperwork. Ava was focused on getting a nice place in her price range. You co-signed everything, right? Which means you're just as much a party to that lease as she is. Marcus felt something stir in his chest. Not hope exactly, but possibility. You think Mr. Patel might have put something like that in our lease? I think Mr. Patel likes you, respects you, and I think he's the kind of old-school landlord who believes in rewarding good tenants. Nora stood up and tossed her half-finished coffee in the trash. Only one way to find out. And if there's nothing, then you figure out your next move. But Marcus? She put her hand on his shoulder. Whatever you do, don't let her guilt you into claiming that baby. Don't let her use your good heart against you. She says it would be good for everyone. She's lying. Maybe to you, maybe to herself, but she's lying. This isn't about what's good for everyone. This is about what's convenient for her and her boss. Marcus finished his coffee. The bitter taste seemed appropriate for the conversation. I keep thinking about 3 years of marriage. 3 years of thinking we were building something together. You were building something. She was just building something different. Nora checked her watch. I have to get to shift change. But Marcus, document everything. Keep records. Protect yourself. Document what? All of it. The appointments, the conversations, when she told you, what she asked you to do. If this goes bad, and it might go bad, you'll want proof of what really happened. Marcus stood up and hugged his sister. She smelled like hospital disinfectant and the vanilla lotion she used on her hands to keep them from getting too dry. Thanks, Nor. That's what family does. Real family. Not the kind that asks you to lie for their convenience. She headed back into the hospital, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor. Marcus watched her go, then walked to his truck. The drive to work took 20 minutes through morning traffic, 20 minutes to think about lease clauses and rent-to-own options, 20 minutes to imagine a world where he didn't have to give up his home because his wife had cheated. The auto shop was already busy when he arrived. 3 cars in the bay, 2 more waiting outside. Normal Tuesday morning chaos. Marcus clocked in and got to work on a transmission job that had been giving everyone trouble. But even with his hands busy and his mind focused on gears and fluid lines, part of him was thinking about Mr. Patel's small office above the laundromat, about paperwork he'd signed 3 years ago without reading every word, about possibilities he hadn't considered. His phone buzzed around lunchtime, a text from Ava. Can we talk tonight? I have some ideas about how to make this work. Marcus stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. Some conversations could wait until he knew what his options were. The laundromat smelled like detergent and steam. Washing machines hummed and churned while a few people folded clothes at the long tables. Marcus climbed the narrow stairs to the second floor, where Mr. Patel kept his small office. The door was open. Mr. Patel sat behind a desk covered in receipts and maintenance logs, reading glasses perched on his nose as he went through the day's paperwork. Marcus, he looked up with a smile. What brings you here? Everything okay with the apartment? Actually, that's what I wanted to talk about. Marcus stepped into the office. The lease we signed. I was wondering if you could help me understand some of the details. Mr. Patel gestured to the chair across from his desk. Of course. Sit, sit. What kind of details? Marcus sat down and tried to figure out how to ask without explaining why he was asking. Nora mentioned that sometimes long term leases have special clauses, options for tenants who've been reliable. Ah, Mr. Patel leaned back in his chair. You're asking about the rent to own provision. Marcus felt his heart skip. There is one? Of course. You've been excellent tenants for 3 years. Never late with rent. Never caused problems. You take care of the place like it's your own home. Mr. Patel opened a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. When I draw up leases for good people, I like to include options, ways for them to build something instead of just paying someone else's mortgage. He flipped through papers until he found what he was looking for. Here, Section 12. After 3 years of timely payments, tenant has the option to purchase property at fair market value, minus 50% of rent paid. Marcus read over the clause. It was there in black and white, legal language that basically said he could buy the house if he wanted to, if he could afford to. I don't remember this being discussed when we signed. Your wife was in a hurry that day. Needed to close quickly for some work reason. She initialed each page without reading, and you co-signed based on her assurances. Mr. Patel smiled. But you're both equally bound by all terms, including this one. What would fair market value be? Mr. Patel pulled out another folder. I had an appraisal done last month for insurance purposes. Current value is $165,000 minus the 50% of rent you've paid. He did quick math on a calculator. Would bring your purchase price to about $120,000. Marcus felt dizzy. I don't have that kind of money. You might have more than you think. You've been paying $2,400 a month for 3 years. That's $86,000 in rent. Half of that, $43,000, comes off the purchase price. So you'd need financing for about $77,000. That's still a lot. For a house worth $165, that's a very good deal. And you have excellent credit. I know because I ran a check when you applied. Plus, steady employment. A bank would be happy to loan you $77,000 with those credentials. Marcus stared at the paperwork. Numbers that seemed impossible an hour ago suddenly looked real. How fast could something like this happen? If you're serious, very fast. I have a lawyer who handles these transactions. Simple deed transfer. Bank approval for someone with your credit history shouldn't take more than a few days. Mr. Patel leaned forward. Are you thinking about exercising this option? Maybe. Can I ask what's changed? 3 years you've been happy renting. Now suddenly you want to buy? Marcus was quiet for a moment. Mr. Patel had always been good to them. Fair rent, quick repairs, never prying into their business. He deserved honesty, at least part of it. Things are changing at home. I might need to know what my options are. Understanding crossed Mr. Patel's face. He'd been a landlord for 20 years, probably seen his share of marriages fall apart. I see. Well, if you want this house, my advice is to move fast and quiet. Get the paperwork started before anyone else has time to complicate things. What do you mean? I mean, if there's going to be a divorce, lawyers get involved. Things get messy. Better to establish ownership clearly before that happens. Marcus thought about the manila folder under his couch cushion, the bank statements he'd separated, the appointment photos on his phone. If I wanted to start the process, what would I need to do? Mr. Patel pulled out a form from his desk drawer. Sign an intent to exercise the option. I file it with the county. Then we schedule the deed transfer and arrange financing. How long do I have to decide? The option expires at the end of your lease term, but Marcus? Mr. Patel leaned forward again. If you want this house, don't wait. Real estate is only going up in this neighborhood, and good houses don't stay available forever. Marcus took the form, read through it carefully this time. It was straightforward. He wanted to buy the house. Mr. Patel was willing to sell under the lease terms. Simple. Can I think about it overnight? Of course, but if you decide yes, come back tomorrow evening. I'll have my lawyer standing by. Marcus folded the form and put it in his pocket. Thank you, Mr. Patel. Thank you for being a good tenant. Whatever happens, I hope things work out for you. The drive home took Marcus through neighborhoods he'd driven through 1,000 times, past the coffee shop where he and Ava had their first date, past the hardware store where they'd bought paint for the bedroom, past all the small landmarks of a life they'd built together, or thought they'd built together. Now it looked like he might be able to keep the house, keep the home they'd made, even if the marriage was over. It wasn't what he'd planned 3 years ago, but it was something. It was a start. Dinner came from the grocery store deli counter. Rotisserie chicken that was probably yesterday's but still hot. Potato salad in a plastic container. Green beans from a can. Not fancy, but it filled the table and gave them something to do with their hands. The TV played the evening news with the sound turned down. Politicians pointing fingers, weather reports promising rain, normal problems for normal people. Marcus ate without tasting much. Ava picked at her food like she was afraid it might bite back. The silence stretched between them like a bridge neither wanted to cross. I've been thinking about what we discussed last night, Ava finally said. What part? All of it. The baby. Our situation. How to make this work. Marcus set down his fork. And? I think I understand why you're upset, why this feels impossible. But I also think there might be a way to approach this that feels better for both of us. I'm listening. Ava straightened up, shifting into what Marcus recognized as her work voice. Professional. Persuasive. The tone she used when she needed buy-in from difficult clients. The way I see it, we have a few different options. We could go with the traditional approach. You're listed as the father. Everything proceeds normally. Or we could be more creative. Creative how? We could establish a co-parenting arrangement from the beginning. Full transparency about the biological father, but a clear agreement about your role in the child's life. Financial support, decision-making authority, legal standing. Marcus watched her face as she spoke. She'd thought this through, probably spent the day at work sketching out solutions instead of focusing on whatever corporate crisis needed her attention. You want me to co-parent your boss's baby. I want us to find a solution that acknowledges the reality of the situation while protecting everyone involved. Everyone. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What does Brent want? Something flickered across Ava's face. Brent wants what's best for the child. That's not what I asked. Brent understands that this situation is complicated. He's willing to work with us to find an arrangement that makes sense. Has he offered to leave his wife? That's not. This isn't about Brent and his wife. This is about us, our marriage, our future. Our future. Marcus stood up and carried his plate to the sink. Hard to plan a future when I don't understand the present. What do you mean? He turned to face her. I mean, you keep talking about arrangements and agreements and what's best for everyone. But you haven't told me what you want. I want our marriage to survive this. Why? The question seemed to surprise her. What do you mean, why? I mean, why do you want our marriage to survive? Because you love me? Because it's convenient? Because divorce would be messy? Ava was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was smaller. Because I do love you. Because I made a terrible mistake and I want to fix it. You can't fix cheating. You can only choose what happens next. Then I choose us. I choose our marriage. Marcus dried his hands on a dish towel and hung it carefully on the rack. Everything in its place, like always. And what about Brent? Do you choose him too? It's not like that. What's it like? It was one night, one stupid mistake that I regret more than anything I've ever done. But now you're having his baby. Now I'm having a baby that I need to figure out what to do about. Marcus studied her face, looking for something he wasn't sure he'd recognize if he found it. Have you considered other options? What do you mean? You know what I mean. Ava went very still. No, that's not. No. Why not? Because it's not right. Because this baby didn't ask to be created, and it doesn't deserve to pay for my mistakes. But I do? That's not what I said. That's what you're asking. The sound of a squeaky gate drifted through the window. Mr. Ortega from next door wrestling with the latch that had been sticking for weeks. Normal neighborhood sounds. Normal problems that could be fixed with oil and a screwdriver. Marcus moved toward the back door. I'm going to take out the trash. We're not done talking. Yeah, we are. For tonight. The alley behind their house smelled like garbage cans and the Chinese restaurant 2 blocks over. Marcus dragged their bin to the curb and was heading back when Luis appeared from next door. Hey, Marcus. Got a minute? Sure. Luis was about 40, with hands as rough as Marcus's from 20 years of construction work. He'd moved in 6 months ago with his elderly mother and had been nothing but friendly since. That gate is driving me crazy. Squeaks every time Mom tries to use it. I keep meaning to fix it, but with work and everything. He shrugged. You're handy with tools. Think you could take a look this weekend? Of course. I'd pay you, obviously. Don't worry about it. Neighbors help neighbors. Actually, I was thinking bigger than just the gate. Mom needs a ramp built from the back door to the yard. Her arthritis is getting worse, and those 3 steps are getting hard for her. I was going to hire someone, but if you're interested in the work, Marcus considered. He'd never built a ramp, but he understood basic construction, and the extra money wouldn't hurt, especially with everything that was happening. I could take a look, give you an estimate. That would be great. How about Saturday morning? I'll make coffee. Sounds good. They shook hands and Luis headed back inside. Marcus stood in the alley for a moment, breathing air that didn't smell like his wife's perfume or the weight of conversations they couldn't finish. Building something with his hands, solving a problem that had a clear solution. It sounded better than anything he'd done all week. When he got back inside, Ava was loading the dishwasher, moving with careful efficiency, like she was afraid sudden movements might break something that was already cracked. Luis wants me to build a ramp for his mother, Marcus said. That's nice. It'll probably take most of the weekend. Okay. They moved around each other in the small kitchen like dancers who'd forgotten the steps, careful not to touch, careful not to get too close. I'm going to shower, Ava said finally. I'll finish cleaning up. She paused in the doorway. Marcus? Yeah? I know you don't believe me right now, but I really am sorry. For all of it. Marcus squeezed dishwater from the sponge and set it in the sink. I know. Do you think you can ever forgive me? He turned to look at her. She stood in the doorway like someone waiting for a verdict. Hair falling loose from the clip she'd worn to work. Face scrubbed clean of makeup, looking more like the woman he'd fallen in love with than she had in months. I don't know, he said honestly. She nodded and headed upstairs. Marcus finished cleaning the kitchen, then pulled the manila folder from under the couch cushion, added today's conversation to his notes. Times, dates, what she'd said about Brent being willing to work with them. Documentation, like Nora had suggested. He also pulled out the form Mr. Patel had given him, read through it again by the light of the table lamp. Simple language about exercising an option to purchase, about taking ownership of something that had felt like home. Tomorrow, he'd have to decide keep renting from someone else or take a chance on owning something that couldn't be taken away. Marcus folded the form and put it back in the folder. Some decisions were too big to make in the dark, but morning was only a few hours away, and morning had a way of making things clearer. The toolbox felt heavier than usual as Marcus loaded it into his truck Thursday morning. Or maybe everything felt heavier now that he was carrying the weight of decisions he didn't want to make. Work helped, always did. Engines didn't lie to you. They either ran or they didn't. Problems had solutions that you could see and touch and fix with your hands. But even with his mind focused on timing belts and brake pads, part of him kept thinking about the form in his folder, about Mr. Patel waiting for an answer, about the possibility of walking into that small office above the laundromat and signing papers that would change everything. Lunchtime came and went. Marcus ate a sandwich from the vending machine while reading through financing information he'd printed from bank websites, mortgage calculators, interest rates, terms, and conditions that seemed designed to confuse anyone who didn't speak fluent money. But the numbers worked out. Barely, but they worked. His phone buzzed. Text from Ava. Working late tonight. Board prep. Don't wait up. Working late, with Brent probably, going over presentations and whatever else they did when they were alone in his office after hours. Marcus deleted the message and got back to work. 5:30 found him parked outside the laundromat again. Through the big windows, he could see people folding clothes and feeding quarters into machines. Normal people dealing with normal problems. Clean clothes and busy schedules and dinner plans. Mr. Patel was waiting when Marcus climbed the stairs. "I hoped I'd see you today," the older man said, waving him into the office. "Have you made a decision?" Marcus pulled the form from his pocket. "I want to exercise the option." Mr. Patel smiled. "Excellent. I think you're making a smart choice. When can we do the paperwork?" "Tomorrow afternoon, if you're available. I spoke with my lawyer this morning. He can meet us at the bank at 2 o'clock. We'll handle the deed transfer and set up your financing all at once." "That fast?" "That fast. Like I told you, for someone with your credit and employment history, this is straightforward." Mr. Patel opened his calendar. "Can you get away from work tomorrow at 2?" Marcus nodded. "I'll make it work." "Good. Bring identification and your bank statements from the past 3 months. The lawyer will handle everything else." They shook hands across the desk. Mr. Patel's grip was firm and warm, the handshake of a man who kept his word. "Marcus," he said as they walked toward the door, "I hope this gives you the stability you're looking for. Thank you for everything. Thank you for being a good tenant. Now you'll be a good homeowner." The drive home took Marcus through the same neighborhoods as always, but now he looked at them differently. Property values and maintenance issues, investment potential and long-term equity. The mind of a homeowner instead of a renter. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway. Ava still at work, probably. Still in meetings with Brent. Still figuring out how to protect her career and her secret. Marcus let himself in and turned on the lights. The living room looked different somehow. Smaller, maybe. Or maybe he just saw it differently now that it might actually belong to him. He opened his laptop and did more research. Home inspection checklists, property tax rates, insurance costs, all the details of ownership that he'd never had to think about before. By the time he closed the laptop, it was past 10, and Ava still wasn't home. Working late, she'd said. Board prep. Marcus made himself a sandwich and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at the backyard where he'd probably build Luis's mother a ramp this weekend, looking at the shed where he kept his tools, looking at all the small pieces of a life that was about to become officially his. The front door opened just after 11. Ava's heels clicked on the hardwood as she set down her purse and hung up her coat. "Hey," she called out. "I know it's late, but we need to talk." Marcus dried his hands and walked to the living room. Ava looked tired, stressed, her work clothes wrinkled from a long day of meetings and decisions. "How was your board prep?" "Productive. We finalized the Q4 presentations." She sat on the edge of the couch, still wearing her work clothes. "But that's not what I need to talk about." "What then?" I spoke with Brent today about our situation, about options. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. And he's willing to help, financially, with the baby, if we can work out an arrangement that protects everyone's interests. What kind of arrangement? He'd set up a trust fund, college education, medical expenses, everything the child would need to have a good life. In exchange for what? Discretion, privacy, no public acknowledgement of paternity. Marcus sat in the chair across from her. He wants to pay you to keep quiet. He wants to provide for his child without destroying his marriage or his career. And what do I get out of this arrangement? You get to be a father to a child who would want for nothing, who would have every advantage. Accept the truth about who their real father is. Sometimes the truth isn't the most important thing. Marcus stared at his wife. When did you start believing that? When I realized that sometimes protecting people you love means making complicated choices. Protecting people you love. Marcus repeated the phrase. Who are you protecting, Ava? Me? The baby? Or yourself and Brent? All of us. I'm trying to protect all of us. Marcus stood up and walked to the window. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of traffic on the main road. Porch lights glowed like small beacons in the darkness. What if I said no? To which part? All of it. The paternity claim, the trust fund, the whole arrangement. Ava was quiet for a long moment. Then, I guess we'd figure out what comes next. Divorce? If that's what you want. Marcus turned back to face her. Is that what you want? I want us to find a way through this. I want our marriage to survive. Even if it means building it on a lie, even if it means making compromises that aren't perfect but work for everyone involved. Marcus thought about the deed transfer scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, about signing papers that would make him the sole owner of this house, about the conversation they'd be having tomorrow night when Ava came home to new locks and new rules. I need time to think about it. How much time? I don't know. A few days, maybe longer. Ava nodded. I can give you a few days. But Marcus, I need to know that you're really considering it, that you're not just stalling while you figure out how to leave. I'm considering everything, including staying, including staying. It wasn't exactly a lie. He was considering staying, just not in the way she thought. Ava stood up and smoothed down her skirt. I'm going to take a shower and go to bed. Thank you for listening, for being willing to think about it. Ava? Yeah? The board prep tonight, was it really just about Q4 presentations? Her face went very still. What are you asking? I'm asking if you're still sleeping with him. No. The word came out quick and sharp. I told you. It was one time. One mistake. Marcus studied her face, looking for tells again, signs of deception. But either she was telling the truth or she'd gotten better at lying. Okay. Okay, you believe me? Or, okay, you heard what I said? Okay, I heard what you said. She nodded and headed upstairs. Marcus listened to her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of water running in the shower. Tomorrow at 2 o'clock, he'd sit in a lawyer's office and sign papers. Tomorrow night, he'd come home to a house that belonged to him. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, he sat in the dark and listened to his wife shower upstairs. Tonight, he could still pretend that some problems had solutions that didn't require choosing between bad and worse, even if he was running out of nights for pretending. Friday afternoon felt different from every other Friday Marcus had lived through. The auto shop hummed with its usual end-of-week energy, but he moved through his tasks like a man walking underwater. Every wrench turn, Every diagnostic check, every conversation with customers felt like it was happening to someone else. At 1:30, he clocked out early, told his supervisor he had an appointment, didn't mention it was the kind of appointment that would change everything. The bank smelled like carpet cleaner and coffee. Soft music played from hidden speakers while people in business clothes moved between teller windows and loan officer desks. Marcus had been here before to set up checking accounts and apply for his truck loan, but today felt different. Today, he was buying a house. Mr. Patel waited in the lobby, wearing a pressed shirt and carrying a leather briefcase that looked older than Marcus. With him stood a thin man in his 50s with kind eyes and calloused hands. Marcus, this is David Chen, my attorney. He'll handle the paperwork. They shook hands. David's grip was firm and brief. Mr. Patel has explained the situation. This should be straightforward, shall we? The loan officer's desk was covered with forms and documents, purchase agreements and title transfers and financing applications that reduced 3 years of Marcus's life to numbers on paper. Credit score is excellent, the loan officer said, scanning her computer screen. Employment history is solid. With the down payment from the rent to own clause, we can approve financing for the balance at 4.2%. Marcus signed his name again and again. Initials and full signatures and dates that would be recorded in county offices and bank databases. Legal proof that he was taking ownership of something real. The deed transfer is effective immediately, David explained as they finished the last documents. The property is now legally yours, Mr. Cole. Marcus stared at the deed copy in his hands, his name printed in official black ink. Sole owner of 1247 Maple Street, a address that had been home for 3 years, was now actually his. Congratulations, Mr. Patel said as they walked out of the bank. You're a homeowner. The word felt strange in Marcus's mouth. Homeowner, not renter, not tenant, owner. Thank you for everything, for the opportunity. Thank you for being the kind of tenant who deserved it. Mr. Patel patted Marcus on the shoulder. Take care of that place. It's a good house. Marcus drove home slowly, taking the long way through neighborhoods where other people were just finishing their normal Friday afternoon routines, picking up dry cleaning and stopping for groceries and planning weekend activities. He parked in the driveway and sat for a moment, looking at the house. His house. The blue paint on the trim needed touching up. The front steps could use resealing. Small maintenance issues that were now his responsibility instead of someone else's. It felt good. Inside, Marcus pulled out his phone and sent Ava a text. House arrangement finalized. We'll discuss living terms tonight. Then he walked through each room like he was seeing it for the first time. The kitchen with its outdated appliances and scratched counters. The living room where they'd watched movies and argued about money. The bedroom upstairs where they'd made love and made promises. All of it his now. Marcus climbed to the attic and pulled down a box he'd stored there when they'd first moved in. Important documents from his bachelor days, bank statements and tax returns and the life insurance policy he'd bought when he'd turned 30. At the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, was something he'd almost forgotten about. A small wooden sign his grandfather had made for him when Marcus had bought his first car. Hand-carved letters that spelled out Cole Property. His grandfather had been a carpenter, built houses all over the county with nothing but hand tools and stubborn pride. He died when Marcus was 15, but not before teaching him that a man's worth was measured by what he could build with his own hands. Marcus carried the sign downstairs and hung it by the front door. It looked right there, like it had been waiting 3 years to find its proper home. His phone buzzed, Ava responding to his text. What do you mean, house arrangement? Marcus typed back. We'll talk tonight. Then he walked to the shed and pulled out his toolbox. Luis was probably home from work by now, and Marcus had promised to look at that gate. The gate hung crooked on hinges that hadn't been oiled in years. Simple fix. 5 minutes with the right tools, and it swung smooth and quiet. Luis appeared from the back door, carrying 2 bottles of beer. "You're a miracle worker," he said, testing the gate. "Mom will be so happy." They sat on Luis's back steps and drank beer while the afternoon sun slanted through the trees. Normal Friday evening quiet. Kids playing in distant yards, someone grilling burgers, the smell of cut grass and summer ending. "So, about that ramp," Luis said, "you still interested in taking a look?" Marcus studied the 3 concrete steps leading from the back door to the yard. Standard height, maybe 8 inches each. The ramp would need to be long enough to meet disability standards, 12 feet probably, with railings and a non-slip surface. "I can build it," Marcus said. "How soon do you need it?" "No rush. Mom's managing for now. But winter's coming, and those steps get slippery when it rains. I could start tomorrow. Have it done by Sunday afternoon." "That fast?" "It's not complicated. Just needs to be done right." They talked through materials and measurements while the sun sank lower. Normal conversation between neighbors, the kind of talk Marcus had missed without realizing it. "You seem different today," Luis said as they finished their beers. "Different how?" "I don't know. Lighter, maybe. Like something good happened." Marcus smiled. "Something did happen. I bought my house today." "No kidding? Congratulations, man. That's huge." "Yeah, it is." They shook hands, and Marcus headed home. The house felt different when he walked through the door. Not just because it was his now, but because he'd made a decision, taken action instead of just reacting to what other people wanted. He made dinner, pasta and sauce from a jar, garlic bread from the frozen section. Nothing fancy, but it was his food in his kitchen at his table. The front door opened just after 7. Ava's voice called out from the entryway. "Marcus, I got your text. What did you mean about house arrangements?" She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still wearing her work clothes, tired eyes and worry lines that hadn't been there 3 years ago. "Sit down," Marcus said. "We need to talk." She sat across from him at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd eaten breakfast this morning, where they'd shared 1,000 meals over 3 years of marriage. But now it felt different, like the furniture had changed along with everything else. "I exercised the rent-to-own option in our lease," Marcus said. "As of this afternoon, I own this house." The color drained from Ava's face. "What are you talking about?" "There was a clause in the lease you signed. After 3 years of timely rent payments, either tenant could purchase the property. I exercised that option today." "I never saw any clause like that." "You were in a hurry when we signed. You initialed every page without reading it." Ava stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. "You bought the house without discussing it with me?" "I bought the house because it's my home, because I've been paying rent for 3 years and wanted something to show for it." "But we're married. We make decisions like this together." "Like you made the decision to get pregnant with your boss?" The words hung between them like smoke. Ava's mouth opened, then closed. "That's different," she said finally. "How?" "Because this affects both of us. The house, where we live, our future." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "Our future. Let's talk about that." He pulled a folded paper from his pocket, a printout he'd prepared that afternoon. "These are the new living arrangements," he said, sliding the paper across the table. "You can read through them, but here's the summary. This is my house now. You can stay for 30 days while you figure out your next step. No rent, but you follow house rules. No overnight guests. No drama. We keep separate finances, and I'm not claiming paternity of your baby." Ava read through the paper, her face growing paler with each line. "You can't do this." "I just did." "We're married," I have rights. You have the right to find your own place to live. You have the right to file for divorce if you want to split our assets. But you don't have the right to my house. Your house. She looked around the kitchen like she was seeing it for the first time. This was our home. It was our rental. Now it's my house. Ava's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? Because you asked me to raise another man's baby and pretend it was mine. Because you think I'm stupid enough to go along with whatever arrangement protects you and Brent. Because you forgot that I'm not just some convenient solution to your problem. That's not how I see you. That's exactly how you see me. The reliable guy who'll clean up your mess and keep your secrets. Ava wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. What if I don't sign Brent's NDA? What if I tell everyone the truth about the baby? That's your choice. And if I do that, if I give up my job and my career, would you consider staying married to me? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. It was a fair question. Maybe the only fair question she'd asked since Tuesday night. I don't know, he said finally. But I know I won't stay married to someone who asks me to live a lie. Ava nodded slowly. So, my choices are sign the NDA and lose you, or tell the truth and lose my job. Your choices are figure out what kind of person you want to be. Everything else follows from that. She folded the house rules paper and put it in her purse. 30 days. 30 days. And after that? After that, you'll have your own place and we'll figure out divorce paperwork. Unless I choose the truth over my job. Even then, maybe. I don't know if I can trust you again, Ava. I don't know if what we had was real or just convenient. She stood up slowly, like her legs weren't working right. I need to think about this. Take all the time you need. You've got 30 days. She walked toward the stairs, then stopped and turned back. The deed. Is it really in your name only? It's really in my name only. How did you afford it? Turns out I've been building equity for 3 years without knowing it. Turns out I'm not as powerless as you thought. Something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or respect, or fear. I'll be upstairs, she said finally. Marcus listened to her footsteps on the stairs, the bedroom door closing with a soft click. Then he was alone in his kitchen, in his house, with choices that felt like progress instead of surrender. He pulled out his phone and called Nora. How did it go? She asked, without preamble. I'm a homeowner. And? And I gave Ava 30 days to figure out what she wants to do next. How'd she take it? About like you'd expect. Shocked, angry, scared. Good. Good? Good that she's scared. Maybe scared will make her think about what she's really asking of you. Marcus walked to the window and looked out at his backyard, his shed, his property line. I don't know if this was the right thing to do. You set boundaries. You protected yourself. You stopped letting other people make decisions about your life. Nora's voice was gentle but firm. That's exactly the right thing to do. Even if it ends my marriage? Especially if it ends your marriage, because what you had wasn't really a marriage anyway. It was just you being convenient while she figured out what she actually wanted. Marcus was quiet for a moment. She asked if I'd reconsider if she told the truth about the baby, gave up her job instead of signing the NDA. What did you tell her? That I didn't know. Do you know? Marcus thought about it, really thought about it. I think I'd respect her more, but I don't know if that would be enough. That's honest. Yeah, maybe too honest. There's no such thing as too honest. Not anymore. They talked for a few more minutes about lumber prices and weekend plans and all the normal things that felt extraordinary after a day like today. When Marcus hung up, the house felt quiet, but not empty. He made himself a sandwich and ate it standing at the counter. looking out at the yard where he'd build a ramp for Luis's mother tomorrow, looking at the shed where he'd stored 3 years' worth of tools and hope, and the belief that hard work would be rewarded. Turned out he'd been right about that last part. Saturday morning came with clear skies and the kind of crisp air that promised a good day for building something. Marcus loaded his truck with lumber from the hardware store and drove home to find Luis waiting with coffee and a measuring tape. "Sleep okay?" Luis asked as they laid out materials in the backyard. "Better than I have all week." "New house? New start?" "Something like that." They worked in comfortable silence, measuring twice and cutting once like Marcus's grandfather had taught him. Luis turned out to be handy with tools, and his questions about joinery and support beams showed he understood construction basics. "You ever think about doing this professionally?" Luis asked as they notched the first support beam. "Building ramps? Building anything. You've got good hands for it." Marcus considered the question while he marked measurements. "I like fixing engines, like solving problems that have clear solutions." "This has a clear solution too. Mrs. Ortega needs to get from her back door to her garden. We build a ramp. Problem solved." "Yeah, but engines don't have feelings. Don't make decisions that complicate everything." Luis laughed. "You're talking about more than engines now." "Maybe." They worked through the morning, fitting pieces together with the satisfaction that came from building something useful. Around noon, Nora appeared with a cooler full of ice water and sandwiches. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, looking over their progress. "That's going to be beautiful when you're done." "It's going to be safe," Marcus corrected. "Beautiful is extra." Same thing. When it comes to building something that matters. Nora helped them carry lumber while they ate, asking smart questions about slope angles and weight distribution. She'd learned construction basics working summers with their uncle's roofing crew, back when college seemed impossible expensive and every job skill mattered. "How's the house situation?" she asked quietly while Luis was inside getting more coffee. "Different. Good different. And Ava? Thinking about her choices, I hope. What do you think she'll choose?" Marcus wiped sawdust from his hands with a rag. "Honestly, I think she'll sign the NDA and take the trust fund money, keep her job and her secret. And if she does, then she'll find an apartment near her office and will file for divorce." "You sound okay with that." Marcus looked around the yard, at the half-built ramp and the tools laid out in careful order, at the house that belonged to him now and the shed where he kept everything he'd earned through his own work. "I think I am okay with it. Finally." Luis returned with coffee and stories about his mother's excitement over the ramp, how she'd been watching from the window all morning, planning which plants she'd move to make her garden easier to tend. "She wants to cook for you tomorrow," Luis said. "Sunday dinner. Her famous tamales. You interested?" Marcus thought about Sunday dinners alone in his house, about the quiet that would settle over everything once Ava moved out. "I'd like that." They finished the frame by late afternoon, then started on the decking, pressure-treated lumber that would last through Michigan winters and spring floods, each board measured and cut and secured with screws that wouldn't work loose over time, building something to last. "You know what I like about this?" Luis said as they installed the last board. "What?" "It's going to make someone's life better. Every day. For years. That's not nothing." Marcus tested the ramp with his full weight, checking for flex or weak spots. It felt solid, safe, like something that would hold up under whatever weight it needed to carry. "No," he said, "that's not nothing at all." The sun was setting by the time they finished the railings. Mrs. Ortega appeared from the house, moving carefully on her walker to test the ramp herself. "Es perfecto," she said, gripping the rails as she walked slowly up and down. "Muchas gracias." She hugged Marcus with surprising strength, and he felt something warm settle in his chest, the satisfaction that came from solving someone's real problem, from building something that mattered. "Tomorrow we eat," she announced. 2 o'clock. You bring appetite." "Yes, ma'am." Luis helped him load tools back into the truck while the last light faded from the sky. "What do I owe you?" Luis asked. "Cost of materials. That's it. Come on, man. Your time is worth something." Neighbors help neighbors. You said it yourself. They shook hands in the driveway. Two men who'd built something good together on a day when building something felt exactly right. The house was quiet when Marcus went inside. Ava's car wasn't in the driveway. Working late again, probably. Or maybe driving around thinking about choices that couldn't be unmade. Marcus showered off sawdust and sweat, then made himself dinner. Leftover pasta and a salad that would have made Nora proud. He ate at the kitchen table while looking over the house rules he'd given Ava yesterday. They seemed fair, clear boundaries without cruelty. 30 days to figure out her next step. No drama in the meantime. It wasn't vindictive, just practical. The front door opened just after 9. Ava's heels on the hardwood, her purse hitting the counter with the soft thud of expensive leather. "How was your day?" she called out. "Good. Built a ramp for Mrs. Ortega." She appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in work clothes, but looking more relaxed than she had all week. "That's nice. How did it turn out?" "Good. She can get from her house to her garden now without help. That'll make a big difference for her." They talked like normal people for a few minutes, about the weather and weekend plans and Luis's promise of Sunday tamales, small talk that felt almost like the conversations they used to have. "Marcus," Ava said finally, "I've been thinking about what you said, about choices. And I called Brent today, told him I couldn't sign the NDA." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "Why?" "Because you were right, about living a lie, about what kind of person I want to be." "What did he say?" "He was angry, said I was being naive and emotional, said I'd regret destroying both our careers over some principle." "And?" "And I told him that some principles were worth more than careers." Marcus studied her face, looking for signs that she was telling him what he wanted to hear instead of what was true. "What happens now?" "Now I figure out how to tell my family and the board that I'm pregnant and Brent is the father. I figure out how to handle a scandal that might cost me my job." "Why?" The question seemed to surprise her. "What do you mean, why?" "I mean, why are you doing this? For me? For the baby? For yourself?" Ava was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than usual. "Remember what you said about choosing what kind of person I want to be? Yeah, I want to be the kind of person who tells the truth, even when it's hard, even when it costs me something." Marcus felt something he hadn't felt since Tuesday night. Not forgiveness exactly, but possibility. "That's going to be difficult. Everything worthwhile is difficult. Your mother's going to be furious. My mother's been furious with me about something since I was 16. This is just the latest thing. And your job? Maybe I'll lose it. Maybe I won't. But at least I won't have to lie every day." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "What about us?" "I don't know. You said you needed to see what kind of person I chose to be. Well, this is what I'm choosing. Honesty. Honesty. Finally." They sat in quiet for a moment, the kitchen clock ticking away, seconds that felt different from the ones that had come before. "I don't know if this changes anything between us," Marcus said finally. "I'm still hurt. I still don't trust you, and I still won't raise another man's child. I understand. But I respect what you're doing. I respect you for choosing truth over convenience. It's what you would have done. Maybe, but you're the one actually doing it." Ava nodded and stood up. "I'm going to make some calls, set up meetings for Monday, figure out how to tell people what actually happened." That's going to be hard. Yes, but lying was harder. She paused in the doorway. Marcus, thank you. For what? For making me choose. For not letting me take the easy way out. Marcus watched her go upstairs, listened to her voice as she made phone calls. That would change everything. Her conversation with her mother, her conversation with someone from HR, her conversation with what sounded like a lawyer, all the conversations he'd expected her to avoid. Outside, the neighborhood settled into Saturday night quiet, porch lights glowing, television flickering in living room windows, normal people ending normal days. Marcus cleaned up his dinner dishes and looked out the window at the ramp he'd built, solid and straight and ready to carry whatever weight it needed to bear. Tomorrow he'd eat tamales with neighbors who'd become friends. Tomorrow Ava would start facing consequences for choices she'd made. Tomorrow would bring new problems and new solutions and new ways to build something worth keeping. But tonight felt different, like maybe honesty really could change things, like maybe truth was worth the cost after all. Sunday morning brought soft light and the promise of Mrs. Ortega's famous tamales. Marcus woke on the couch for the last time, not because he had to, but because the bed upstairs still felt like territory that belonged to someone else's marriage. Tomorrow, he'd reclaim the bedroom. Tonight, he'd sleep in his own bed in his own house like the homeowner he'd become. Ava was already up, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and a cup of coffee. She looked like she hadn't slept much, but there was something different about her face, cleaner somehow, like washing off makeup that had been caked on too thick. Morning, she said without looking up from her screen. Morning, working on Sunday, writing statements for tomorrow's meetings. Marcus poured coffee and sat across from her. How many meetings? 3, HR at 9, my supervisor at 10:30, board conference call at 2. That's a lot. That's what happens when you admit to sleeping with the CEO. Her voice was matter of fact, no self-pity or drama, just the practical tone of someone facing consequences they'd earned. You nervous? Terrified, but also relieved. Relieved? I've been lying for 3 months about the baby, about Brent, about everything. Lies are exhausting. Marcus studied her profile as she typed. When had she learned to lie so well? When had honesty become something she had to choose instead of something that came naturally? What will you tell them? Exactly. The truth. That I had an affair with Brent during the July company retreat, that I'm pregnant as a result, that I take full responsibility for my choices. And Brent? Brent will have to deal with his own consequences. He's not going to be happy about that. No, he's not. Ava closed her laptop and looked at Marcus directly for the first time all morning. I know this doesn't fix anything between us. I know I still hurt you and broke promises and acted like you were disposable. Yes, you did. But I want you to know that choosing honesty, it's partly because of what you said Friday night about what kind of person I want to be. Marcus sipped his coffee. Only partly. And partly because I looked in the mirror yesterday and didn't recognize who I'd become. Someone who'd ask her husband to lie. Someone who'd protect her boss's marriage while destroying her own. And now? Now I'm someone who tells the truth, even when it costs everything. They sat in quiet for a moment. Outside, church bells rang in the distance. Sunday morning sounds of a world going about its normal business. I'm having dinner at Luis's today, Marcus said finally. That sounds nice. You're welcome to come if you want. Ava looked surprised. Really? Mrs. Ortega asked about you yesterday, said you haven't been around much lately. I've been working a lot. I know, but the invitation's open. Thank you. I think I'll stay here and prepare for tomorrow. Okay. Marcus finished his coffee and rinsed the cup. I'm going to do some maintenance on the truck before dinner. Oil change, tire rotation, Normal Sunday stuff. Marcus, yeah? The house rules you gave me, the 30 days. Does that timeline change now that I'm telling the truth? Marcus considered the question. It was fair. Her choice to be honest changed things, but it didn't erase what had happened. I don't know yet. Let me see how this week goes. Okay. But Ava, telling the truth doesn't automatically fix everything. It just makes fixing things possible. I understand. Marcus grabbed his keys and headed for the garage. The truck needed attention, and working with his hands would give his mind something clear to focus on. The oil change took an hour, simple, necessary maintenance that kept things running smoothly. Like honesty in a marriage, Marcus thought, regular attention to prevent bigger problems down the road. Luis appeared just as Marcus was finishing up. Mom wanted me to make sure you're still coming for dinner. Wouldn't miss it. Good. She's been cooking since dawn. Tamales, rice, beans, the works. Probably enough food for 10 people. I'll bring my appetite. She also wanted me to ask if Ava would like to come. She feels bad that she's only met her a few times. Marcus wiped grease from his hands with a shop rag. I invited her. She's got work to do. On Sunday? Big week ahead. Luis nodded like he understood that sometimes work took over everything else. Well, the invitation's open if she changes her mind. They talked about the ramp for a few minutes, how solid it felt, how much easier it made Mrs. Ortega's daily routine, small improvements that made a real difference. You know what? Luis said as they finished talking. You should think about doing this professionally. Building ramps? Building anything. You've got good instincts for construction, and there's always demand for quality work. Marcus had been thinking the same thing, not as a replacement for his job at the auto shop, but as something extra. Weekend projects that brought in additional income while helping people solve real problems. Maybe I will. If you ever want to partner up on bigger jobs, let me know. I've got more work than I can handle. They shook hands and Marcus went back inside. The house felt quiet and clean. Ava had moved to the living room, her laptop balanced on her knees as she worked through whatever statements she was preparing. Marcus showered and changed into clean clothes, not because Mrs. Ortega would care what he wore, but because showing up for someone's home-cooked meal deserved effort. At 2 o'clock exactly, he knocked on Luis's front door. The smells hit him first, corn masa and pork and spices that had been simmering all morning. Then Mrs. Ortega's smile as she opened the door, wearing an apron over her Sunday dress. Marcus, come, come, everything is ready. The dining room table was set for 4, even though only 3 of them would be eating. The extra place setting sat empty, waiting for Ava, who probably wouldn't come. But the conversation was warm, and the tamales were perfect, and Mrs. Ortega insisted on hearing every detail about the ramp construction. How they'd calculated the slope, why they'd chosen specific materials, what tools had worked best. You have good hands, she said, watching him eat. Like my husband, he could build anything. Was he a carpenter? Sigh, built half the houses in this neighborhood, back when it was just farms and empty lots. She told stories about the neighborhood's early days while they ate, about young families moving in and children growing up, and all the small changes that turned empty land into a community. This is good neighborhood, she said finally. Good people who help each other. Like you helping with my ramp. Neighbors help neighbors. Exacto. But not everyone understands this. Some people think only about themselves. Marcus thought about Ava working alone in their living room, about the meetings she'd face tomorrow and the consequences she'd chosen to accept. Sometimes people learn, he said. Sometimes they do. Luis walked Marcus home just as the sun was setting. The neighborhood looked peaceful in the golden light, kids riding bikes while parents worked in gardens. Normal Sunday evening calm. Thanks for dinner. Your mom's an amazing cook. She likes you, says you have a good heart. She's pretty special herself. She is. And Marcus, if things get difficult this week, if you need somewhere to go or just want to talk, our door's always open. They'd reached Marcus's driveway. The house looked quiet from outside, warm light glowing in the living room window. Thanks. I appreciate that. That's what neighbors do. Marcus went inside to find Ava still on the couch, but now she was reading instead of typing, a paperback novel he'd never seen before. How was dinner? Great. Mrs. Ortega sends her regards. That's sweet of her. How's the preparation going? Finished. I know what I'm going to say tomorrow. Marcus sat in the chair across from her. Want to practice? Run through it once? You do that? Yeah, if it would help. Ava set down her book and took a breath. Then, she spoke in the clear, professional voice he recognized from work presentations. In July, during the company retreat, I made a poor personal decision that resulted in an inappropriate relationship with CEO Brent Laird. I am currently pregnant as a result of this relationship. I take full responsibility for my actions and understand that there may be professional consequences. Marcus nodded. That's good. Clear and direct. Think it's enough? Depends what they ask next. They'll ask if it was consensual. They'll ask how long it lasted. They'll ask if it affected my work performance or created any conflicts of interest. And you'll tell them? The truth, that it was consensual but wrong, that it lasted one night but the consequences are permanent, that I've been compromised professionally ever since. That last part will probably cost you your job. Probably. But keeping my job would cost me something more important. What's that? My self-respect and any chance of earning back yours. Marcus felt something warm move through his chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but recognition. This was the woman he'd married 3 years ago, the one who'd disappeared somewhere between corporate promotions and keeping up appearances. I'm proud of you for doing this, he said, even if it doesn't change anything between us. Even then, Ava nodded and picked up her book again. I'm going to read for a while, then get to bed early. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Good luck. Thank you. Marcus went upstairs to gather some clothes from the bedroom. Tomorrow he'd move back into his own bed, but tonight he'd give Ava space to prepare for what was coming. As he passed the window, he looked out at the ramp he'd built yesterday, solid and straight in the moonlight, ready to bear whatever weight it needed to carry. Tomorrow, Ava would face the consequences of choices that couldn't be undone. Tomorrow, they'd both find out what honesty cost and what it might be worth. But tonight, for the first time since Tuesday, Marcus felt like they were both choosing to be people worth respecting. Even if respect wasn't the same thing as trust, even if honesty wasn't the same thing as forgiveness, it was a start. Monday morning felt like the first day of school, and the last day of a job rolled into one. Marcus woke early in his own bed for the first time in a week. The mattress felt different, firmer, like sleeping on solid ground instead of shifting sand. Downstairs, Ava was already dressed for battle. Navy suit with sharp lines, hair pulled back in a style that meant business. She moved around the kitchen with the focused energy of someone preparing for war. Coffee's fresh, she said without looking up from her phone. Thanks. Marcus poured a cup and sat at the table. Through the window, he could see Luis heading to his truck, toolbox in hand. Normal Monday morning routine for people with normal Monday morning problems. What time's your first meeting? 9. Ava's voice was steady, but Marcus caught the slight tremor in her hands as she gathered papers. HR wants to hear my statement before they decide next steps. You ready? As ready as someone can be for professional suicide. She said it like a joke, but Marcus heard the fear underneath. 3 years of climbing corporate ladders, about to come crashing down because of one night and 3 months of lies. It's not suicide if you're choosing truth over convenience. Tell that to my bank account. Marcus studied her profile. You having second thoughts? Every 5 minutes, but I'm not changing my mind. Good. Ava looked at him then, really looked, like she was trying to memorize something. Whatever happens today, I want you to know I'm grateful for not letting me take the easy way out. You're taking the right way out. That's different. Is it? Yeah, it is. She gathered her papers and purse, checking her reflection in the kitchen window. Professional, composed, ready to face whatever came next. I'll call you tonight, let you know how it went. Okay. Marcus watched her drive away, then finished his coffee in the quiet kitchen. His kitchen, in his house, on the morning his wife would probably lose her job for telling the truth. It felt complicated and clean at the same time. The auto shop was busier than usual. 3 cars with transmission problems and a truck that needed a complete brake job. Marcus threw himself into the work, grateful for problems that could be solved with tools and knowledge and careful attention to detail. Around lunch, his phone buzzed. Text from Ava. First meeting done. HR is scheduling interviews with legal and board members. Long day ahead. Marcus typed back. You okay? Surviving. More tonight. The afternoon crawled by. Every time his phone made a sound, Marcus expected bad news, or good news, or some kind of news that would tell him what came next. But no more texts came. At 5:30, Marcus clocked out and drove home through neighborhoods that looked exactly the same as they had this morning. Same houses, same trees, same people walking dogs and checking mail. But everything felt different. The house was dark when he pulled into his driveway. Ava's car wasn't there. Still in meetings, probably. Still facing consequences that couldn't be avoided. Marcus made dinner, grilled cheese and soup from a can, simple food that tasted better than it should have in the quiet of his own kitchen. He was washing dishes when headlights swept across the window. Ava's car in the driveway, engine turning off. The sound of heels on concrete, then keys in the lock. She appeared in the kitchen doorway looking like someone who'd been through a blender, hair falling loose from its clip, makeup worn thin, suit wrinkled from a day of difficult conversations. How bad? Marcus asked. Bad, but not as bad as it could have been. She sat heavily at the table, kicked off her heels, and rubbed her feet. Talk to me. HR was professional. Cold, but professional. They documented everything, asked all the questions I expected, and told me they'd need time to investigate. Investigate what? Whether there were policy violations beyond the obvious ones, whether my relationship with Brent created conflicts of interest, whether other employees were affected. Marcus poured her a glass of water and sat across from her. And? And they put me on administrative leave pending the investigation. Full pay, but I can't come to the office or attend meetings. How long? 2 weeks minimum, maybe longer. What about Brent? Something dark flashed across Ava's face. Brent had his own meeting with legal, separately. I don't know what he told them. But you can guess. I can guess he threw me under the bus to save his own career. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, not for Ava's sake, but for the principle of it. What did he say? According to my supervisor, Brent claimed I initiated the encounter, said he was intoxicated and made a mistake he deeply regrets, said he's been trying to distance himself professionally, but I've been persistent. That's bullshit. That's corporate politics. Marcus stared at his wife. And you're okay with him lying about you? I'm not okay with it, but I'm not surprised by it. Ava drank half the glass of water in one long swallow. Powerful men protect themselves. It's what they do. So, what happens now? Now they review everything. Interview other employees to see if anyone noticed inappropriate behavior. Check email records and travel receipts and meeting logs. Looking for what? Patterns. Evidence of a longer relationship. proof that someone's lying about what really happened. Marcus thought about the travel receipts he'd noticed weeks ago. Company paid trips that aligned with conception timing. What will they find? The truth that Brent and I traveled together multiple times over the past 6 months, that we had private meetings that weren't on official calendars, that this wasn't just one drunken mistake. So he's lying. He's protecting himself, which means I'll probably be the only one who loses their job. Marcus felt something cold and sharp settle in his stomach. That's not fair. Fair doesn't factor into corporate decisions. Image does. Liability does. Brent's marriage to the board chairman's daughter does. His wife is the board chairman's daughter? Did I not mention that? Ava's laugh was bitter and tired. Catherine Laird, née Morrison? Daddy bought Brent his CEO position as a wedding gift. Jesus. So you can see why he's highly motivated to make this my fault instead of our fault. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. What will you do? Fight it. Document everything I remember about our interactions. Prove that he's lying about who initiated what. Even if it costs you everything? Everything's already gone, Marcus. My job, my reputation, probably my marriage. All I have left is my version of the truth. She was right. Everything was already broken. The question now was whether the pieces could be put back together into something worth keeping. There's something I need to tell you, Marcus said. What? A few weeks ago, I noticed travel receipts on your phone, company trips that lined up with when you would have gotten pregnant. Ava went very still. You noticed that? Hard not to notice when your wife is traveling with her boss and comes home pregnant. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was hoping I was wrong. Because I didn't want to believe my wife was having an affair. But you kept track of the dates. I kept track of everything. Appointments, conversations, timelines, all of it. Ava stared at him. You have evidence that Brent's lying about it being one time. I have evidence that you were traveling together regularly, that this wasn't a one-night mistake. Will you share that evidence with my lawyers if this goes to court? Marcus considered the question. Sharing what he'd documented would hurt Brent and possibly help Ava keep her job, but it would also mean getting involved in corporate politics he didn't understand. If you need it, yes. Relief washed over Ava's face. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. My evidence proves Brent's lying, but it also proves you were lying too, about how long the affair lasted. I know. So, why did you lie to me about it being one time? Ava was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than usual. Because one time sounds like a mistake, multiple times sounds like a choice. It was a choice. Yes, it was. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, but understanding. She'd lied because the truth made her look worse. Normal human behavior that happened to destroy everything good between them. How many times? Does it matter? Yeah, it matters. 4 times, over 3 months, always during business trips. Always initiated by you, like Brent claims? No, sometimes him, sometimes me. We were both choosing to do something we knew was wrong. Marcus nodded. At least she was being honest now, even when honesty made her look worse. I'll help you fight Brent's lies, he said finally, but I won't help you minimize what you did. I understand. And it doesn't change anything about us, about the house rules or the 30-day timeline. I understand that too. They sat in quiet for a moment, the kitchen clock ticking away seconds that felt heavy with things that couldn't be unsaid. I'm going to order pizza, Marcus said finally. You hungry? Starving. I couldn't eat anything all day. Pepperoni and mushrooms? That sounds perfect. Marcus called for delivery while Ava went upstairs to change clothes. When she came back down, she looked more like herself. Jeans and a sweater instead of corporate armor. hair loose around her shoulders. They ate pizza in front of the TV, watching a cooking show where everything turned out exactly as planned. Normal Monday night routine for a couple whose Monday had been anything but normal. "What happens tomorrow?" Marcus asked as they finished eating. "I meet with my lawyer. Start documenting everything I can remember about my relationship with Brent. Build a case that he's lying to save himself. And after that, I wait and hope that truth actually matters more than politics." Marcus looked at his wife sitting on his couch in his house, facing consequences for choices she'd finally stopped lying about. "It might not," he said honestly. "I know, but you're doing the right thing anyway." Finally. Outside, the neighborhood settled into Monday night quiet, people finishing dinner and helping kids with homework and planning Tuesday morning routines. Normal problems for normal people. Inside, Marcus and Ava cleaned up pizza boxes and tried to figure out what came next for two people who'd spent 3 years building something that might not survive the week. It felt fragile and uncertain and more honest than anything they'd shared in months. Maybe that was enough for now. Tuesday brought rain and the strange rhythm of a house where one person went to work and the other stayed home. Marcus left for the auto shop at his usual time while Ava prepared for a different kind of workday, lawyer meetings and documentation and building a defense against charges that might destroy whatever career she had left. "Good luck today," Marcus said as he grabbed his keys. "Thanks, I'll need it." The auto shop felt normal in ways that Marcus appreciated. Clear problems with clear solutions. Engines that either ran or didn't. Brakes that either worked or needed replacement. Around lunch, Nora stopped by with coffee and curiosity. "How's she handling everything?" Nora asked as they sat in the break room. "Better than I expected. Scared but committed to telling the truth." "And you? How are you handling everything?" Marcus considered the question while he stirred sugar into terrible coffee. "I don't know yet. She's doing the right thing now, but that doesn't erase what she did before." "You sound confused." "I am confused. Part of me is proud of her for choosing honesty. Part of me is still angry that she put us in this situation. Both things can be true." "Yeah, they can." Nora studied his face like she was reading vital signs. "What do you want to happen?" "I want her to keep her job and learn from this. I want Brent to face consequences for lying. I want us to figure out whether our marriage is worth saving." "That's a lot of wants." "Yeah, it is." "What do you think will actually happen?" Marcus thought about corporate politics and powerful men and wives whose fathers owned companies. "I think Ava will probably lose her job. I think Brent will keep his. And I think we'll probably get divorced." "You sound okay with that." "I'm getting okay with it. Finally." They talked about weekend plans and Luis's invitation to partner on construction projects. Normal conversation that felt extraordinary after a week of crisis management. When Marcus got home that evening, he found Ava sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by papers and printouts, legal documents and timeline charts, and what looked like a detailed reconstruction of every interaction she'd had with Brent over the past 6 months. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Long, complicated, but productive." She gestured at the papers. "We're building a case that Brent initiated contact multiple times, that he used his position to create opportunities for inappropriate behavior." Marcus looked over the timeline, meeting requests and travel approvals and expense reports that told a story of systematic inappropriate conduct. "This is thorough." "It has to be. Brent's got lawyers who specialize in making problems disappear. I've got a family law attorney who's never handled corporate harassment before." "You hired a family law attorney?" "She's what I could afford on short notice. Corporate attorneys cost more than I make in a month." Marcus sat down and studied the timeline more carefully. "This shows a pattern. Clear abuse of power. It shows what actually happened. Whether that matters to the board is anyone's guess." What does your lawyer think? She thinks we have a good case for wrongful termination if they fire me while keeping Brent. She also thinks corporate politics might trump legal protections. Marcus pointed to a entry from early August. What's this meeting about? Brent asked me to review quarterly projections in his office after hours, said it was urgent. Was it? The projections? No, nothing that couldn't have waited until the next day. But you went anyway. I went because my boss asked me to, and because I was stupid enough to think I could handle the situation professionally. Marcus read through more entries, a pattern of after-hours meetings and business trips that created opportunities for inappropriate behavior. Did you document any of this at the time? Some of it, calendar entries, expense reports. The business documentation is all there. What about the personal stuff? The inappropriate behavior? No, I was trying to pretend it wasn't happening. Marcus understood that kind of denial, the hope that ignoring a problem would make it go away. Your lawyer thinks this is enough? She thinks it's a start. But Marcus? Ava looked up from her papers. There's something else. Something I found today that I need to tell you. The tone in her voice made Marcus's stomach tighten. What? I'm not the first. What do you mean? I mean, Brent has done this before, with other employees. My lawyer did some research into his employment history. And? 3 other women over the past 5 years, all in subordinate positions, all eventually transferred or fired after brief relationships with him. Marcus felt something cold move through his chest. Jesus! 2 of them signed NDAs. One just disappeared from the company with no explanation. Did you know about this? I suspected something with one of them, Sarah Chen from marketing. She left suddenly last year after working closely with Brent on a project. But I told myself it was just office gossip. And now? Now, I think Sarah was smart enough to get out before things got complicated. Marcus looked at the timeline again. Dates and meetings and business trips that created a pattern of predatory behavior. This changes everything. How? Because it's not just about you anymore. It's about a pattern of abuse that the company has been covering up. If I can prove it. Can you? Maybe. My lawyer wants to contact the other women, see if they're willing to break their NDAs and testify about what really happened. Will they? I don't know. NDAs come with financial penalties. Speaking out could cost them everything. Marcus was quiet for a moment. What if they don't cooperate? What if you can't prove the pattern? Then it's my word against Brent's. And his word carries a lot more weight than mine. Because his wife is the board chairman's daughter. Because he's a powerful white man, and I'm an employee who admitted to having an affair with him. The kitchen felt heavy with the weight of systems designed to protect people like Brent and punish people like Ava. I'm sorry, Marcus said finally. For what? For not seeing this sooner. For not understanding what you were dealing with. I didn't understand what I was dealing with either. I thought I was having an affair. Turns out I was being systematically manipulated by someone who's done this before. That doesn't excuse the choices you made. No, it doesn't. But it explains some things. Marcus studied his wife's face. She looked tired and determined, and more honest than she'd been in months. What do you need from me? Nothing. This is my fight now. That's not what I asked. Ava was quiet for a moment. I need you to understand that I'm not the same person who asked you to lie about this baby. I need you to see that I'm trying to do the right thing, even if it's too late. I see it. And I need you to know that whatever happens between us, I'm grateful for the way you handled this. You could have thrown me out or made this uglier than it needed to be. You're my wife. Whatever else has happened, you're still my wife. For now? For now. They worked together to organize her papers and prepare for tomorrow's meetings. Marcus helped her cross-reference dates and create cleaner timelines. Two people working toward a goal that might not save their marriage but might prevent other women from going through the same thing. It felt like the most honest work they'd done together in months. When they finished, Ava gathered her papers and headed upstairs. Marcus? Yeah? Thank you for helping with this. Thank you for doing it. Finally. She nodded and went upstairs, leaving Marcus alone in his kitchen with the feeling that something important was shifting. Not their marriage necessarily, but their understanding of each other. Maybe that was enough for now. Maybe understanding was the first step toward whatever came next. Wednesday morning brought clarity in the form of a phone call that changed everything. Marcus was drinking coffee and reading the sports section when Ava's phone rang at 7:30. He watched her face change as she listened, going from sleepy confusion to sharp attention. Yes, I can be there by 10, she said. Thank you for calling. She hung up and stared at her phone for a moment. What was that about? Marcus asked. Sarah Chen wants to meet. She read about the investigation in the company newsletter and called my lawyer. The woman you suspected had a relationship with Brent? The same one. She wants to tell her story. Marcus felt something shift in his chest. That's good news. Maybe she just wants to warn me about what I'm getting into. Ava moved around the kitchen with focused energy, gathering papers and checking her reflection in the window. This wasn't the defeated woman who'd come home Monday night. This was someone preparing for battle. Where are you meeting her? Coffee shop downtown. Neutral territory where we can talk without company lawyers listening in. You nervous? Terrified, but also hopeful for the first time since this started. Marcus finished his coffee and grabbed his keys. Good luck today. Thanks. I'll call you tonight with an update. Okay. He paused at the door and looked back at his wife. Ava, whatever Sarah tells you, whatever you find out about Brent's pattern, don't let it make you forget that you still made choices. Don't use his behavior to excuse yours. She nodded slowly. I won't. The choices I made were still mine to make. Good. Just wanted to make sure we were clear on that. We're clear. Marcus drove to work thinking about patterns and choices and the difference between being victimized and being a victim. Ava had been manipulated, but she'd also made decisions. Both things could be true at the same time. The auto shop was busy with Wednesday morning rush jobs, cars that needed immediate attention and customers who couldn't wait until the weekend. Marcus threw himself into the work, grateful for problems that could be solved with the right tools and careful attention to detail. Around lunch, his phone buzzed with a text from Ava. Meeting went well, more tonight, short and professional, which meant either very good news or very bad news. The afternoon crawled by. Every time someone's phone rang, Marcus found himself listening for news he couldn't quite define. Finally, 5:30 arrived, and he could head home to whatever waited there. The house was quiet when he pulled into the driveway. Ava's car was there, but no lights were on. Marcus found her sitting on the back steps, staring at the ramp he'd built for Mrs. Ortega. How'd it go? He asked, sitting down beside her. Sarah confirmed everything I suspected and more. More how? Brent doesn't just target subordinates. He targets women who are ambitious and isolated, women who won't be believed if they speak up. Ava's voice was steady, but Marcus heard something underneath it. Anger, maybe, or clarity. What did she tell you? That her relationship with Brent lasted 6 months, that he promised her promotions and threatened her job when she tried to end it, that when she finally went to HR, they offered her a transfer to the Seattle office or a generous severance package. And she took the severance. She took the severance and signed an NDA that prevents her from ever discussing what happened. Marcus was quiet for a moment. But she's talking to you. She's talking to me because she found out about two other women, Jennifer Walsh and Lisa Rodriguez. Both had similar experiences with Brent. Both were quietly transferred or terminated. How many women is that total? Four that we know of. Probably more that we haven't found yet. Jesus. Sarah says the company knows. HR has files on all of these cases, but they've been managing the situation instead of stopping it. Marcus felt anger rise in his chest, not just for Ava, but for all the women who'd been manipulated and silenced and pushed out of jobs they'd earned. What happens now? Now, Sarah, Jennifer, and Lisa are willing to break their NDAs and testify about what really happened. They're tired of protecting a company that didn't protect them. Even though it might cost them money, even though it will definitely cost them money, the NDA violations alone could bankrupt all of them. But they're doing it anyway. They're doing it because they don't want Brent to do this to anyone else. Marcus studied his wife's profile. And what about you? How does this change your situation? It changes everything. My lawyer thinks we have enough evidence to prove systematic harassment, sexual coercion, abuse of power that goes back years. Which means? Which means this isn't about me having an affair anymore. This is about a pattern of predatory behavior that the company has been covering up. Do you think you'll keep your job? I think the company is about to have much bigger problems than what to do with me. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Mrs. Ortega tend her garden. The old woman moved slowly but steadily along the ramp Marcus had built, carrying a watering can and stopping to check each plant. There's something else, Ava said finally. What? Sarah asked me something I hadn't considered. What's that? She asked if I was planning to sue the company or just fight to keep my job. Are you? I hadn't thought about it. I was so focused on proving I wasn't lying that I didn't consider other options. What kind of other options? Civil lawsuit, sexual harassment, creating a hostile work environment, wrongful termination if they fire me. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. Lawsuit money? Potentially enough to matter? According to Sarah's lawyer, potentially a lot. Especially if we can prove the company knew about Brent's pattern and did nothing to stop it. What would you do with that money? Ava was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. I hadn't thought that far ahead. Think about it now. I guess I'd use it to start over. New career, maybe. Or go back to school and learn something completely different. What about the baby? What about the baby? Would lawsuit money change your plans? For the pregnancy? Ava looked at him directly for the first time since he'd sat down. Are you asking if I'd keep the baby if I had money to raise it alone? I'm asking what you're thinking about. I'm thinking that having money doesn't change the fact that this baby was conceived through a relationship that was fundamentally coercive. I'm thinking that bringing a child into the world under these circumstances might not be fair to anyone involved, including you. Including me. Marcus felt something he hadn't expected. Relief, maybe, or possibility. What does your lawyer say? She says I should focus on the harassment case first, make decisions about other things once the immediate crisis is resolved. That sounds smart. Does it change anything? Between us? If I decided not to continue the pregnancy? Marcus considered the question honestly. It would remove one major complication, but it wouldn't change the fact that you had an affair. It wouldn't change the trust issues. I know. But it might make other conversations possible. What kind of conversations? The kind we'd need to have if we wanted to try to rebuild instead of just ending things. Ava nodded slowly. I've been thinking about that too. And? And I think I want to try to rebuild, if you're willing. Marcus looked at his wife sitting on the steps of his house, facing consequences she'd chosen instead of avoided. She looked different than she had 2 weeks ago. Cleaner somehow. more like the woman he'd married 3 years ago. I don't know if I'm willing yet, he said honestly, but I'm not unwilling. What would it take? For you to be willing? Time, counseling, proof that you understand why this happened and how to make sure it never happens again. And if the pregnancy isn't a factor, then those conversations become possible instead of impossible. They sat together as the sun sank lower in the sky. Mrs. Ortega finished her watering and waved at them from her garden before heading back inside. I have another meeting tomorrow, Ava said finally, with all four women and both lawyers. We're coordinating our statements and building a comprehensive case. How do you feel about that? Scared, angry, determined. Good combination. Is it? For fighting something worth fighting. Ava stood up and brushed dust from her jeans. I'm going to make dinner. Something normal. Pasta and salad and wine if you want it. That sounds good. Marcus. Yeah? Thank you for listening today. For not judging me for the situation I got myself into. Thank you for telling the truth about it. Finally. She nodded and went inside, leaving Marcus alone on the steps. The neighborhood was settling into Wednesday evening quiet. Normal sounds of normal people ending normal days. Tomorrow would bring more lawyers and more meetings and more decisions about things that couldn't be undone. But tonight felt different, like maybe truth really could change things, like maybe honesty was worth the cost after all. Marcus stood up and followed his wife inside. They had dinner to make and conversations to continue and the slow work of figuring out what came next. It felt like a beginning instead of an ending. Finally, Thursday brought news that arrived like a small earthquake. Marcus was eating breakfast when Ava's phone rang at 7:15. He watched her face change as she listened, going from alert to shocked to something that might have been vindicated. When? She asked. How long have you known? She listened for another minute, then hung up. What was that about? Marcus asked. Brent's been suspended pending investigation, effective immediately. Marcus set down his coffee cup. Because of what you and the other women reported? Because of that, and something else, Sarah's lawyer contacted a reporter who's been investigating harassment in corporate settings. Turns out there are more women from Brent's previous companies. How many more? 7, maybe 8, going back 10 years. Marcus felt something like justice move through his chest. So, this is bigger than just your company. This is a career pattern. Multiple companies, multiple victims, multiple cover-ups. And now it's all coming out. The reporter is publishing a story tomorrow. Names, dates, documentation, everything. Marcus studied his wife's face. She looked tired, but determined, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy weight and finally found somewhere to set it down. How do you feel about that? Relieved, vindicated, terrified about being named in the story. Will you be? Probably. I'm the most recent case and the only one who's currently fighting back. That's going to be hard. It's going to be public, but at least it'll be truthful. Marcus finished his breakfast while Ava prepared for another day of meetings and lawyers and building a case that might actually matter now. What happens today? He asked. More coordination with the other women, more documentation, and a meeting with my company's lawyers to discuss settlement options. Settlement? They know they're about to be exposed in a major news story. They want to resolve things quietly before the story breaks. What kind of settlement? I don't know yet, but probably enough to matter. Marcus thought about mortgage payments and new beginnings and all the ways money could create options that hadn't existed before. Be careful, he said finally. Careful how? Don't let them buy your silence. If this story is important enough to tell, make sure it gets told. Even if staying quiet would be worth more money, even then, Ava nodded. I'll keep that in mind. Marcus grabbed his keys and headed for work, leaving his wife to face a day that might change everything for the second time in a week. The auto shop felt normal in ways that Marcus appreciated: transmission jobs and brake repairs, and customers who needed their cars fixed so they could get to work. Simple problems with clear solutions. But throughout the day, he found himself checking his phone, waiting for updates from a battle he wasn't fighting but had a stake in nonetheless. The first text came at lunch. Company offering settlement, 6 figures. Lawyer says it's a good offer. The second came an hour later. Told them I need to think about it. The third arrived just before closing time. Coming home. We need to talk. Marcus drove home through neighborhoods that looked exactly the same as they had this morning, but felt different somehow. Like the world had shifted slightly while he wasn't paying attention. Ava's car was in the driveway when he arrived. Inside, he found her sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread everywhere: settlement offers and legal documents and what looked like a formal contract. "How'd it go?" he asked. "Complicated. They want to resolve everything before the story breaks tomorrow." Everything meaning what? All the harassment claims, all the wrongful termination issues, all of it bundled into one settlement that makes their legal problems disappear. Marcus sat down and looked over the papers. How much? 250,000, plus a guarantee that I keep my job and Brent gets permanently transferred to a non-management position. That's a lot of money. It's enough to change everything. Marcus read through the settlement terms, standard legal language that basically said Ava would take money in exchange for agreeing that nothing bad had happened. What's the catch? NDA. I can't discuss any details of my relationship with Brent or the company's handling of harassment complaints, which means the story doesn't get told, which means my part of the story doesn't get told. The other women could still speak to the reporter. Will they? I don't know. They're being offered similar settlements. Marcus leaned back in his chair. So the company pays everyone off and the problem goes away. The immediate problem goes away, but the pattern continues with the next group of women. Unless someone refuses to stay quiet. Unless someone refuses to stay quiet. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, Luis was working in his yard, probably planning the next project they'd tackle together. Normal neighbor sounds from a world where problems could be solved with tools and honest work. "What are you thinking?" Marcus asked finally. "I'm thinking $250,000 would solve a lot of problems." "What kind of problems?" "Money for a lawyer if we decide to get divorced. Money to start a new career if this job doesn't work out. Money to raise a child alone if I decide to continue the pregnancy." "And what about the other women? The ones who might be hired after you?" Ava was quiet for a long moment. "What about them? They don't get protected if everyone stays quiet." "That's not my responsibility." "Isn't it?" Ava looked at him directly. "Are you asking me to turn down $250,000 to protect women I've never met? I'm asking you what kind of person you want to be. I want to be the kind of person who learns from her mistakes and builds a better life. And you can't do that while also protecting other people? I can't do that if I'm broke and unemployed and facing a lawsuit that could drag on for years." Marcus understood the logic. Money meant security. Security meant options. Options meant the possibility of rebuilding something worth keeping. "What does your lawyer recommend?" "She recommends taking the settlement. Says fighting corporate harassment is expensive and unpredictable and often ends up hurting the victims more than the perpetrators." "What does your gut say?" "My gut says this is my chance to fix the damage I've done. To you, to us, to my own life. By taking money to stay quiet about the damage done to you. By taking money to move forward instead of staying stuck in this situation forever." Marcus looked at the settlement papers again. Enough money to change everything, in exchange for silence about things that probably needed to be said. There's another option, he said finally. What? Take the money but don't sign the NDA. They won't agree to that. Then don't take the money. And do what instead? Fight a legal battle I probably can't win against a company with unlimited resources? And tell the truth. Let the story be told completely instead of partially. Ava stared at him. You want me to give up $250,000 for the principle of it? I want you to consider whether staying quiet is worth more than making sure this doesn't happen to other women. Even if it costs us everything, we've already lost everything that mattered. This is about what we build next. Ava was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than usual. I'm scared, Marcus. I'm scared of being broke and unemployed and facing a future I can't control. I know. The money would give us options, real options to rebuild instead of just survive. Maybe, or maybe it would just be blood money that we'd never feel good about spending. And if I turn it down? If I let the story be told completely? What then? Then you're someone who chose truth over money, someone who protected other women at cost to herself. And you'd respect that choice? I'd respect that choice, even if it made our lives harder. Harder how? Financially, professionally, every way that matters in terms of practical daily life. But you'd respect it. I'd respect it, and I'd be proud to be married to someone who made that choice. Ava nodded slowly. Give me tonight to think about it. I have to respond by tomorrow morning. Okay? And Marcus, whatever I decide, I want you to know I'm grateful for the way you've handled all of this. You could have made this so much uglier than it needed to be. You're my wife. Whatever else has happened, you're still my wife. For now. For now. She gathered the settlement papers and headed upstairs, leaving Marcus alone in his kitchen with the feeling that tomorrow would bring decisions that couldn't be undone. Outside, the neighborhood was settling into Thursday night quiet. Normal sounds of normal people ending normal days. Inside, two people were trying to figure out whether their marriage was worth saving and whether truth was worth more than security. It felt like the most important conversation they'd never quite finished having. Friday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that only comes after a sleepless night of difficult decisions. Marcus found Ava in the kitchen at 6:30, already dressed and drinking coffee like it was medicine. Did you sleep? He asked. Some. Did you? Not much. She looked tired but determined, like someone who'd wrestled with choices and finally chosen a side. I'm turning down the settlement, she said. Marcus felt something warm move through his chest. Why? Because you were right. About what kind of person I want to be. About protecting women I've never met. Even though it costs you everything? Even though it costs me everything I thought I wanted. Marcus poured coffee and sat across from her. How do you feel about that decision? Terrified, relieved, proud of myself for the first time in months. Good. Is it? Good? Yeah, it's good. They sat in comfortable silence while the neighborhood woke up around them. Coffee brewing and cars starting and people heading to jobs that didn't require choosing between money and principle. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now I call my lawyer and tell her to reject the settlement. Then I meet with the reporter and tell him everything I know about Brent's pattern of harassment. And that? After that, I probably lose my job and face a long legal battle and learn to live on whatever savings I have left. And the baby? Ava was quiet for a moment. I've decided not to continue the pregnancy. Marcus felt relief wash over him. When? Next week. I've already made the appointment. How do you feel about that decision? Sad. Relieved. Like it's the right choice for everyone involved. Including you? Especially me. Marcus reached across the table and took her hand. the first intentional physical contact they'd had since this all started. "I'm proud of you," he said. "For which part?" "All of it. For choosing truth over money, for making the hard choice about the pregnancy, for becoming someone I can respect again." Tears filled Ava's eyes. "Does this mean you want to try? To rebuild instead of ending things?" Marcus considered the question honestly. "I think it means we have something worth trying to rebuild. Not a guarantee, not a guarantee, but a possibility. I'll take a possibility." "Good, because that's all I've got right now." Ava squeezed his hand, then let go. "I need to get going. Lawyers and reporters and all the people who'll help me blow up what's left of my career." "You sure about this?" "I'm sure about who I want to be. Everything else we'll figure out as we go." Marcus watched her gather papers and purse and keys. This wasn't the woman who'd asked him 2 weeks ago to lie about another man's baby. This was someone who'd chosen principle over convenience. "Ava, yeah? Tonight when you come home, we'll be different people than we were this morning." "How different?" "I don't know, but different. Is that good or bad?" "I think it's honest." "Finally." She nodded and headed for the door. "See you tonight." "See you tonight." Marcus finished his coffee alone, then headed to work. The auto shop was busy with Friday morning jobs, but throughout the day he found himself thinking about choices and consequences and all the ways people could surprise you. Around lunch, his phone buzzed with a text from Ava. "Story published online. Phone hasn't stopped ringing." An hour later, company called. They're withdrawing the settlement offer. Late afternoon, lawyer says we're in for a fight. Could take years. Just before closing. Coming home. Exhausted, but okay. Marcus drove home through neighborhoods that looked exactly the same, but felt different. Like the world had shifted towards something more honest while he wasn't looking. Ava's car was in the driveway when he arrived. Inside, he found her sitting on the couch, laptop open, reading what looked like news coverage. "How bad?" he asked. "Bad for Brent and the company. Good for other women who might have been targets." Marcus sat beside her and read over her shoulder. The story was thorough and damning. 8 women across 3 companies, a pattern of harassment that stretched back a decade, corporate cover-ups and payoff agreements and NDAs designed to protect predators. "You're quoted extensively," he noticed. "I'm the only one who refused the settlement. Makes me the main source willing to go on record." "Any regrets?" "Ask me in a year when the legal bills come due." "I'm asking now." Ava closed the laptop and looked at him directly. "No regrets. This was the right thing to do. Even though it's going to cost you everything? Even though it's going to cost me everything I thought I wanted." Marcus felt something settle in his chest. Peace, maybe, or possibility. "What do you want now?" "I want to figure out how to rebuild our marriage. I want to learn a new career that doesn't involve corporate politics. I want to be someone you can trust again." "That's a lot of wants." "It's a lot of work." "Yeah, it is." They sat together as the sun sank lower in the sky. Outside, Luis was finishing up some project in his yard. Mrs. Ortega was tending her garden, moving easily along the ramp Marcus had built. Normal Friday evening sounds from a world where people helped each other solve real problems. "Marcus?" "Yeah?" "Thank you for not letting me take the easy way out, for making me choose who I wanted to be. Thank you for choosing to be someone worth rebuilding with." "Are we rebuilding? Really?" "We're starting to rebuild. The rest we'll figure out as we go." Ava nodded and leaned against him. The first time she'd done that since everything changed. It felt careful, but real, like the beginning of something that might actually last. "I love you," she said quietly. "I love you too. Finally. Again. Finally. Again." They sat together in their house, his house that might become their house again, and watched the neighborhood settle into Friday night quiet. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new decisions and all the work of rebuilding something that had almost been lost. But tonight felt like a beginning instead of an ending. Tonight felt like coming home. 2 weeks later, Sunday morning arrived with soft light and the sound of rain on the roof. Marcus woke in his own bed next to his wife for the first time since everything had changed. Not because they'd solved all their problems, but because they'd finally started being honest about them. The kitchen smelled like coffee and the pancakes Ava was making. She moved around the space with easy familiarity, like someone who belonged there again. Not the same as before, but better somehow. Cleaner. "Morning," she said without turning around. "Coffee's fresh." "Thanks." Marcus poured a cup and sat at the table. Through the window, he could see Luis working on some new project in his yard. Mrs. Ortega was probably inside, planning the Sunday dinner she'd invited them to share. "How'd you sleep?" Ava asked. "Better than I have in weeks." "Me too." She set a plate of pancakes in front of him, then sat down with her own breakfast. The same table where they'd had so many difficult conversations over the past month. But this morning felt different, peaceful in ways that had seemed impossible just weeks ago. "Any word from your lawyer?" Marcus asked. "The company wants to settle out of court, quietly, before more women come forward." "More women?" "3 more since the story broke, all from different companies where Brent worked." "Jesus, how many is that total?" 11 that we know of, probably more." Marcus shook his head. "And they all stayed quiet until now?" "NDAs are powerful things, and corporate lawyers are scary, but seeing other women speak up makes it easier to find your own voice." "What kind of settlement are they offering?" "Enough to matter. Not enough to make the legal problems disappear." "You going to take it?" "Probably, but not with an NDA this time. Any settlement includes the right to keep speaking publicly about harassment in corporate settings." "Good. My lawyer says it's a smart compromise. We get enough money to rebuild, and other women get the benefit of someone who's willing to keep talking about these issues." Marcus finished his pancakes and carried his plate to the sink. "Speaking of rebuilding, Luis asked if we want to partner with him on a kitchen renovation project." "We?" "He knows you're good with design and budgeting. Thought you might want to try something different while you figure out your next career move." "Construction work?" "Project management, design consulting, using your business skills in a different industry." Ava considered the idea while she cleaned up breakfast dishes. "I've never done anything like that." "You've never told the truth about sexual harassment either. Turned out you were good at that too." "That's different." "Is it?" "Both require seeing problems clearly and figuring out how to solve them." "I suppose they do." Marcus watched his wife think about possibilities that hadn't existed a month ago. Career changes and new partnerships and all the ways life could surprise you when you stopped lying about what you wanted. "There's something else," he said. "What?" "I've been thinking about this house, about ownership and marriage and what it means to build something together. And I want to add your name to the deed." Ava stopped wiping the counter and looked at him directly. "Why?" "Because I didn't buy this house to keep you out of it. I bought it because I wanted us to have a home we couldn't lose. Even after everything that happened, especially after everything that happened, I learned that I can protect myself without punishing you, that boundaries aren't the same thing as walls." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure that I want to rebuild this marriage as equal partners. I'm sure that I want us to own this home together, for real this time." Tears filled Ava's eyes. "That means a lot to me." "It means a lot to me too." They finished cleaning the kitchen in comfortable silence, then sat on the back steps like they had so many evenings over the past few weeks. The rain had stopped, leaving everything clean and fresh. Regrets? Marcus asked. About which part? Any of it. All of it. Ava was quiet for a moment. I regret the affair. I regret lying to you. I regret putting us through months of pain that could have been avoided. But, but I don't regret where we ended up. I don't regret learning who I actually am when things get difficult. And who is that? Someone who chooses truth over convenience. Someone who protects other women even when it costs her. Someone who's worthy of being loved by a man like you. Marcus took her hand. I'm proud of who you chose to be, even though it made everything harder, especially because it made everything harder. They sat together watching Mrs. Ortega work in her garden, moving easily along the ramp that had become part of the neighborhood landscape, building something useful that would last. What do you think happens next? Ava asked. I think we go to Sunday dinner with the Ortegas. I think we start planning a kitchen renovation project. I think we figure out how to be married to each other all over again. That's a lot of thinking. That's a lot of living. Good living? The best kind. Honest living. Ava squeezed his hand and leaned against him. Not the desperate clinging of someone afraid to be alone, but the comfortable closeness of someone who'd earned her place beside him. I love you, she said. I love you too. Finally. Again. Finally. Again. In the distance, church bells rang across the neighborhood, Sunday morning sounds of a world going about its hopeful business. Inside their house now, really and truly, two people who'd almost lost everything were learning how to build something worth keeping. It felt like the most honest work they'd ever done together. 1 month later, Marcus parked his truck in the driveway of 1247 Maple Street and sat for a moment looking at the small wooden sign by the front door. Cole property, his grandfather had carved, but now it meant something different. Not just ownership, but home. The house looked good. Fresh paint on the trim, new flowers in the boxes under the windows, the small improvements that came when people planned to stay somewhere for a long time. Inside, he found Ava at the kitchen table with blueprints and material estimates spread everywhere. The Morrison Kitchen Project, their first official collaboration with Luis, was turning into something bigger than any of them had expected. How'd the job interview go? She asked without looking up from her calculations. Good. They want someone to run their custom projects division. Residential renovation, small commercial jobs, that kind of thing. And? And they offered me the position. Ava looked up from her papers. That's wonderful. Are you taking it? I'm thinking about it. It would mean leaving the auto shop, starting over in a completely different field. Scared? Terrified, but also excited. Good combination. That's what Nora said. Ava smiled. Your sister knows about taking risks for the right reasons. Marcus sat down and looked over her plans. Clean lines and efficient layouts and all the details that turned empty space into functional beauty. How's the design work going? Better than expected. Turns out corporate project management skills translate pretty well to construction management. Who knew? Luis knew. He's been right about everything so far. Marcus studied his wife's face. She looked different these days. Lighter somehow. Like someone who'd put down a weight she'd been carrying for too long. Settlement finalized yet? Next week. Enough to cover our legal bills and give us a decent cushion for the career changes. And the other women? Sarah got her settlement last month. Jennifer and Lisa are still fighting, but they've got good lawyers now, and 3 more women have come forward with harassment claims. Against Brent? Against the companies that enabled him. Turns out corporate liability for patterns of harassment is a very expensive problem. Marcus felt something like justice settle in his chest. Not perfect justice, but real consequences for people who'd thought they were untouchable. What happened to Brent? Fired. Blacklisted. His wife filed for divorce last week. Good. His whole world collapsed in about 6 months. Amazing how fast that can happen when the truth finally comes out. They worked together for another hour, refining plans and calculating costs and all the careful details of building something that would last. Outside, the neighborhood settled into late afternoon quiet, normal sounds of normal people ending normal days. At 6 o'clock, Luis knocked on the front door with a bottle of wine and news about the Morrison project. They want to add a second bathroom, he announced. Full renovation, custom tile work, the whole thing. That's a bigger job than we planned, Ava said. That's a better job than we planned. More money, more visibility, more opportunity to prove we know what we're doing. They spread the new plans across the kitchen table while Marcus opened the wine. Three partners planning a project that would challenge all of them in different ways. You sure we're ready for something this big? Marcus asked. No, Luis said, but we're ready to try. That's all anyone can do, Ava added. Try, and be honest about what happens next. Marcus looked around his kitchen, their kitchen, at blueprints and wine glasses and the comfortable chaos of people building something together. 6 months ago, his marriage had been built on lies he didn't know about. His career had been comfortable but limiting. His future had seemed predetermined and small. Now he was starting a new job, launching a new business partnership, and rebuilding a marriage with someone who'd learned to choose truth over convenience. It felt uncertain and hopeful and more honest than anything he'd ever been part of. To trying, Marcus said, raising his glass. To trying, Ava echoed. To trying, Luis agreed. They clinked glasses in the warm light of early evening. Three people who'd learned that the best work was usually the hardest work. That building something worth keeping required tools and honesty and the willingness to start over when necessary. Outside, Mrs. Ortega was watering her garden, moving easily along the ramp that had become part of the neighborhood's permanent landscape, building something useful that would last. Inside, Marcus and Ava cleaned up blueprints and talked about tomorrow's meetings and all the small decisions that would shape whatever came next. It felt like the most honest work they'd ever done together. Finally,